So just want to make some space, folks, for our harvest round. And I guess we can get a speaker from each of our groups to kind of mention things that came up, any insights, any needs, especially that this network can help to meet, would be great to talk about, but just kind of anything that came up for folks. We start with group 1.
Yeah, I was with, this is Shelley. I was with Bill and Suzanne, and Bill said a very interesting thing. He's from State College, and what came through was the local Chamber of Commerce. The president really worked in keeping people together. There was a website that turned into a daily update. They had resources available. Suzanne's from a very small town, Port Townsend. There weren't that many cases. People were good about masks. People are working together. In both places, there's very little partisanship, and people were able to work together very well. They have, both towns have a formal emergency plan. And what they would be worried about is, let's see, what was it? Suzanne's worried about fires, heavy smoke, bad pollution. She's asthmatic. Bill's worried about the water supply. And if there were any kind of contaminant, State College would shut down. In Fayetteville, we're worried about flooding. We're also worried about hunger. I didn't mention that. We have a huge issue with hunger here. That's it.
Thank you, Shelley, for that report. Group 2.
I'm not sure whether we were group 2 or not, but we put our notes under group 2. So does John, Bonnie, Stevie wanna, the notes are under group 2 if you want to share.
Okay, let's see if I can find the notes. I don't see the notes, but I'll try to just share from the top of my head.
Top of page 2.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll just, water. How would you get water in an emergency? I think we all thought that was going to be a huge concern, and I don't think anybody feels prepared, far from prepared for an emergency. I mean, we've experienced smoke, fires. Some of us experienced earthquake, and yeah, I mean, it's what else did we talk, and how people deal with it, and we also talked about houselessness and how that is it's an emergency, a disaster, or is an emergency in some areas, and how people are dealing with that in sort of models of resiliency.
Yeah.
Coming together. Yeah.
Yeah, mental health sorts of things.
Yeah, to me, it stood out that none of our, like, we weren't really sure if our cities had a disaster plan. Like we weren't, like, we're so disconnected from our, the city municipalities response that I felt like, okay, this is a obviously homework, for me.
Thank you, group 2. And yeah, on that note, just taking a visit to your city or county website, you can start to explore the different departments, and you can find a lot of resources. And just hearing from folks in local government, they often have a hard time pointing people to the right place. They have resources, but not a lot of people know about them. So just taking a visit there is good homework, as I mentioned. Group 3.
Are we just answering the first question?
You can choose to kind of bring forward any harvest that you think is important to share.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so we talked about being prepared personally, and then as a community, like two different things. There's a little mix of feeling prepared and feeling like the community needs to be more prepared, but also kind of being on our way there. We talked about, we have some people in Vermont, some people, someone from Colorado, some people from Humboldt. Colorado is experiencing water shortages because of massive drought, aridification, great floods that happen after the fires. Apparently Vermont and New England are pretty well situated for a climate crisis. And here in Humboldt, we have wildfires and the risk of tsunami. We talked about an emergency plan for the city, and Colorado's has a multifaceted one, and they're working on getting people more prepared. Humboldt, we are thinking more about looking into identifying that emergency preparedness plan, and then Vermont is not a very good one. And then the issue of a lot of the climate issues being caused by government, and how we need to get corporate money out of government because they are the cause of climate. And so that issue got brought up, and so that's something to think about. And then there was mention about a professor at Colorado State doing community mapping with her students using GIS mapping, which I thought was really fascinating. GIS mapping is something that my team in Humboldt, Cooperation Humboldt, we're talking and trying to plan a mapping project. So hopefully wanting to connect with that professor and see how she organized that, because I think that's a really good idea. Involving students is always a powerful move.
Awesome. Yeah. Fingers to that. Group number 4.
So we might have been group 4, but then
No.
I saw Oscar's name on it.
Yeah,
so,
no, yeah. Oh, was that you typing on our group? Who's typing in our group? Our notes got confused, so that's okay. It was kind of fun. Trying to figure out who that was. Oscar, did you want to do this? Or Rachel?
Well, I mean, we all talked, but Deborah, you can go ahead if you'd like to, or Rachel.
Well, if I can find the notes. Okay. Well, as far as the first question, we were a mix. Everybody said either we're not ready or somewhat ready, but we all agreed that there's always more work to be done, right? So are you ever really ready? I mentioned that we've been doing this for many years now, and we actually drill with the Department of Emergency Management periodically and do a lot of desktops and things. And our big one is the earthquakes and tsunamis, because we figure if we prepare for that, we could handle anything. Communication outages, transportation, water, food, all of that would be disrupted. And then we got a pandemic. So again, it just shows you're never really truly ready. So in Washington and California, we have a lot of similarities with earthquakes, tsunami, and fire and smoke. New Jersey, unfortunately, is dealing with a lot of flooding. That's where Rachel is. But we also talked about how recent events reminded us we all have a common exposure of prolonged power outages. Look what happened to Texas. And then what other service outages could we have due to cyber attacks? So a new frame to think about. And then as far as plans, we're pretty fortunate here in Jefferson County, Port Townsend. We do have a community emergency preparedness, a community emergency plan, a climate action plan, and preparing for climate change plan. Humboldt, they've done a lot of work, but unfortunately it's, they talk a lot about the infrastructure needs to protect their shoreline from sea level rise, but that's very expensive, and it's also very cumbersome in the planning process. So 20 years is not nearly enough time to get anything done there. So there's a lot of concern on that. And the same thing I heard in New Jersey, Rachel mentioned that even though they have those plans, there's really they're not thinking about it from a resilience perspective. And I'd love to hear more on that. We kind of ran out of time. And then as far as asset mapping, Port Townsend did that. We did it as an action group, as a citizens group. We did our own asset mapping and kind of built our program around what we found, and built a lot of partnerships from that asset mapping. And then we built a program to fill the gaps. And in Humboldt, they have a lot of mapping that's done by the city and county, which is the traditional infrastructure type of mapping, but there hasn't been enough work on vulnerability and social economic data. And Oscar made some really good points on the importance of that. So I think that's about it, unless the others want to add something else.
Oh, good. All right. Thank you. That was amazing. We'll move on now to group, I think we're at group 5.
Yeah, I can share some notes on that. There are 3 of us in the group, 2 from California and me from the East Coast near Philadelphia. So one of our group, Mark Cooper, was from Port Townsend. So you already pretty much heard about how they're doing from Deborah. So basically, they're doing very well. Isla Vista was not really nearly as prepared, but they're sort of a new communities, and they are still working on that sort of stuff. The kinds of things that the West Coast is worried about, of course, were wildfires and earthquakes and tsunamis. Out here in the East Coast, we're more concerned about hurricanes and power outages, and extreme heat and cold at different times of the year. One of the things that Mark from Port Townsend mentioned as a sort of a long-term emergency is ageism. He said their county was the oldest in the state, and that presents all kinds of interesting problems ongoingly. He says nobody's really taking that very seriously yet, but it is something to consider. What else? So we were kind of spread all over between being very prepared and not at all prepared, and somewhere in the middle. But one of the things that we mentioned was we have the communication of whatever emergency plans and climate adaptation plans that we have are not nearly well communicated enough with our general public, and that's a real weak link, regardless of how well things look on paper. So that's about it, I think.
Thank you, Shari. Yeah, those plans need to be accessible and in language that community members can actually understand. So that's a really important gap that a lot of transition groups could fill by hosting things like community town halls or just meetings to go through the plan together and then ask questions that local elected officials in different departments should be able to answer. It could help to spur some action. So that's great too.
One thing that Mark Townsend said about, Mark Cooper said about Port Townsend was that they have an annual picnic that is dedicated to emergency preparedness, which is very helpful in getting the word out. So that was really a great idea.
That's awesome. Yeah, do disaster preparedness and make it fun. Make it fun when you have that together. Definitely.
Bring everybody together. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, on to group 6.
So that was David and Justin and Howard and myself. We had I think as with other groups, we had a range of feeling prepared to feeling not prepared at all. I think transition, well, David was feeling very prepared up there. Howard was feeling not at all, and I was feeling kind of middle of the road. Like some I would be, prepared for, and others I wouldn't. And then there are ones that I thought I was prepared for that I turned out that I wasn't. I think that's going to be generally true. I think you can feel really prepared, and then something happens that you just didn't anticipate, and then you're making it up as you go along.
Mhm.
Like you really, really wish that you'd had that canoe on your roof because you thought you were on the high ground, but it turned out you weren't, or, whatever. What we were dealing with kind of collectively, let's see if I can find the list. Fire, earthquake, tsunami, storm, drought, mega fires, volcanoes, potential homelessness, hunger, You know, we've got a real, I guess the rent situation in the Bay Area could potentially be considered a natural disaster, or maybe an unnatural disaster. And, you know, again, a range of feeling prepared versus not feeling prepared. And yeah, let's see. And again, with the town, city, and county, you know, a range of our personal awareness and the awareness of our groups of it, and a real range of actual preparedness. And I know Transition Palo Alto was looking at what can we do to help with COVID, but it turned out that folks were a few steps ahead of us, and we just kind of stepped back and, you know, did our best to not get in their way. But with regards to the mega fires that we had, you know, California's plan for that has always been to use what was effectively slave labor, which was you know, to fill up the prisons with people, and then use that as free labor, and to let massive amounts of fuel would build up, because fighting mega fires is big business, and the bigger the fire, the more money the folks make who fight it. And so you use the cheapest labor possible, and you get the biggest fire possible, and bammo. So hopefully the state is changing that. They talked pretty big about changing that after the last mega fire situation, but you know, it sometimes it takes a few events like that before people figure it out. So, and we didn't get to the fourth question. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the first few, but David typed in a response for himself, saying that Cooperation Humboldt is in the early stages of creating a neighborhood-based community asset map, and that's a pilot project they hope to expand upon. I was, as always, very impressed with the work that Cooperation Humboldt is doing, you know, in regards to emergency prep and getting communities together. Just blows me away every time that I hear it. So yeah, if anybody feels like adding anything, I'm trying to get it into a quick summary because we've only got 6 minutes left, but if any of the other three of you have things to add, go for it.
This is Howard picking up the stone. I've been here before, I've seen this before, and I do not think that collectively we are prepared enough to get through anything but just lip service. So I think that we have to extend our time frame. 3 days is not going to cut it in terms of resiliency. I think we have to have a coordinated effort to change from consumers to producers in some of the basic things that we lack. And my whole thing right here is that this is a wonderful conversation, and it's something that we have to continue, because we don't always get it right on the first time, but we have to keep at this, because at some point in time we'll say, well, it's not perfect, but we can, at least we can do something. You'll have room so that you can react. We don't even have that in my communities now. If the stuff fell apart, good luck. You know, we can't just complain. I'm not saying that people aren't doing anything, because they are, but it's a case of, in my opinion, too little, too late. And so I would love to talk to you leaders, and we will over the course of the next period of time, to try to get a coherent approach together, because we are leaders for getting other people involved, because most people aren't even on this level. They're not thinking like it just recently. So that's just my point of view. I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
Because like, I can't even get my family to get involved with this because they don't think it's an issue. You know, the government will step in and do what they have to do. And so I don't even want to focus on that. Don't bring me any bad news.
Yeah.
So, but that's not going to get us through this. So let's strengthen our network at the hyper local level. And if enough of us get strengthened, they're going to come to us. Make no mistake about it. People are going to ask us, what do I do now? What do I do now? And we should have that kind of in place so we can help each other. Bye.
I hear it. Thank you, Howard, for that. That's so true. There's a lot there. I'm going to pass it over to you. I see that your hand's raised.
Yeah, thank you. I want to kind of respond to Howard and say, let's do it. I think that there are enough people in this, and even in this room, that are motivated, interested. I just need an accountability partner, to be honest. Somebody that's like, hey, did you do this? You know, in your community? Well, if you haven't, you should, you know, kind of thing. And after doing a 3-month research on like community resilience and disaster prep, my intention was to start a community conversation. I just haven't gotten there, but you know, we still have maybe 2-3 months to prepare for wildfire season. And the first thing I would recommend is that barbecue. Second thing I would recommend is like talking about neighborhood mapping, or you know, some sort of an organizing party to prepare your block. And just, you know, if your block isn't kind of working, then maybe we can go to the closest resilient hub, you know. But I'd be into, if anybody else is interested, to kind of keep convening around this topic, and I'm happy to organize it, because it was my intention to continue this kind of process, I think, you know, of just us making it up as we go, but in an intentional, thoughtful way. And I have, you know, some ideas about how to start it, but I think we can co-create how to, you know, really drive it home.
Absolutely. So just hearing what folks have reflected forward, and as we're coming to the end of our session here, so I had on the screen share some inspiration again in that Resilient and Ready Together guide. Getting neighbors together to share a meal, center the joy, center the co-creative aspect and the opportunities to really build, because again, disaster response and preparedness, we need to be able to respond to unexpected situations. We need to be able to respond. And once the time comes for us to heal, we don't want to bounce back to normal. We are actively building space for transformation and for healing. So we are so lucky to have access to a vibrant network of so many brilliant leaders, amazing experts. This is valuable. This is wealth to me. Community is wealth. And so like Aya was saying, we want to offer a continued, you can call it a community of practice, a support network, whatever we want to call it. But the plan was to have spaces on a bi-monthly basis for folks to convene, check in, see how your progress has been with getting prepared, any challenges or issues, and then also have, again, your added dose of inspiration from folks across the network and across other networks that we're allied with, who are doing really amazing work to be prepared and to build resilient communities. So I just want to thank you all for being here today. This is tremendous work. We're just getting started. And again, transformation is the goal. So I really am grateful for you all. Thank you so much for being here this evening with us. Thank you, Aya, so much for what you've contributed as well, and just everyone here again.
Thanks, everybody.
Yay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So long.
Have a wonderful evening.